Somewhere in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, there is a garden bed that has not seen a tiller blade in over 40 years. The man who tends it is in his 70s now, and he walks the rows the same way his father did, and the same way his grandfather did before that. He does not own a bottle of Roundup. He has never purchased a bag of synthetic fertilizer. He spends maybe 4 hours a week in that garden from April through October, and every single season it produces more food than his family can eat. The soil beneath his boots is so dark and loose and alive that you could push your hand into it up to the wrist without resistance. It smells like rain and earth and something older than memory. 300 miles east, in the suburbs of New Jersey and the backyards of Ohio and the side yards of Georgia, millions of American gardeners are waking up this spring to the exact same nightmare they woke up to last spring. The crabgrass is back. The bindweed has returned and wrapped itself around everything. The dandelions never actually left. The thistles are taller than the tomato cages. And the bill at the garden center is climbing again, because the spray that was supposed to solve it last year only solved it for about 6 weeks before the weeds staged their next invasion. The global herbicide market in the year 2024 exceeded $34 billion annually. That number is not an accident. It is the outcome of a business model built not on permanently solving the weed problem, but on managing it just efficiently enough to keep gardeners coming back to the same aisle, buying the same products year after year after year. The Amish gardener in Lancaster County never stepped onto that treadmill. And the reason why comes down to one piece of information that the modern gardening industry has almost no financial incentive to share. The first thing you have to understand is what tilling actually does to your soil. Because the answer is the opposite of what most gardeners believe. Every spring, the ritual begins. The rototiller comes out of the garage. The soil gets churned until it looks dark and fluffy and clean and empty. The gardener stands back and feels the satisfaction of a fresh start. That feeling is a lie. Research conducted at Michigan State University revealed something that should permanently change the way every backyard gardener thinks about their soil. In a single square foot of typical garden soil, there are anywhere from 56 to nearly 15,000 viable weed seeds buried at various depths. 15,000 seeds packed into a patch of earth no larger than a dinner plate, all of them sitting in the dark, waiting. Scientists call this the weed seed bank, and it is one of the most patient systems in nature. A single common lamb's quarters plant, one of the most familiar weeds in North American gardens, can produce over 72,000 seeds in one growing season. Those seeds can remain viable underground for 5, 10, even 20 years. Velvet leaf seeds have been documented germinating after sitting in total darkness for decades. All those buried seeds require is 2 things: a brief flash of light and a bit of moisture. Every single time a tiller blade slices through the ground, it reaches into that buried vault, scoops seeds upward to the surface, and hands them exactly what they have been waiting for. It is the gardening equivalent of buying lottery tickets for your weeds every spring and wondering why they keep winning. But the destruction does not stop at the seed bank. Soil biologist Dr. Elaine Ingham spent years documenting what she calls the soil food web, a living network of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, and microorganisms that together perform every function a healthy garden needs. This network is extraordinarily complex and extraordinarily fragile in one specific way. It cannot survive being physically torn apart. The most critical element of this network is a class of organisms called arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. These microscopic threads attach directly to plant roots and extend outward through the soil for distances that the roots themselves could never reach, pulling in water and minerals from far deeper in the earth and delivering them directly into the plant. Think of them as a second, invisible root system, one that took years to build and that a single pass of a tiller destroys in minutes. These fungi also produce a biological adhesive protein called glomalin, and glomalin is the substance responsible for binding soil particles into the loose, spongy, crumbly texture that every gardener is trying to achieve. Destroy the fungi, and you destroy the glomalin. By midsummer, the bed that looked so promising in April has compacted and baked into a crust that sheds water like asphalt. The Amish understood this not through laboratory science, but through generations of watching what happened when they stopped fighting the soil and started working with it instead. Their answer was radical in its simplicity: retire the tiller permanently and never bring it back. Here's what happens to a garden bed when the tilling stops. The buried weed seeds stay buried. Without that annual disturbance bringing them to the surface, the seeds in the deeper layers never see light, never germinate, and slowly lose their viability over several seasons. The fungal networks, undisturbed, begin rebuilding and expanding. Glomalin accumulates in the soil structure. The earthworm population, which collapses dramatically in heavily tilled soils, rebounds. A single acre of healthy, undisturbed garden soil can support over 1 million earthworms. Each one of those worms is continuously tunneling, aerating, and depositing castings, which are widely recognized as one of the most nutrient-dense natural fertilizers available, containing immediately bioavailable nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in ratios that synthetic fertilizer manufacturers actually try to replicate. Within 2 to 3 seasons of no-till practice, the biological transformation of the soil is measurable by anyone who digs a hand into it. The color deepens, the texture opens up, the smell changes, and the weeds begin to lose the war they were winning for decades. But retiring the tiller immediately raises the most obvious practical question. If you are not churning the soil, how do you deal with the existing weeds and grass that are already growing in the bed? That is where something most Americans throw into the recycling bin every single week becomes one of the most powerful tools in the garden, and it is the foundation of the entire Amish no-till system. The answer is plain, brown, corrugated cardboard, and what it can do to a weed problem in a single afternoon is something that no bottle of herbicide has ever matched. Walk into any forest that has never been logged and look at the ground. It is never bare. Not once, not anywhere. A continuous blanket of fallen leaves, decomposing bark, broken twigs, and layered organic debris covers every inch of soil surface. That blanket performs 3 functions simultaneously, and without any human effort. It smothers weed seedlings before they can establish, it feeds the microbial community underneath, and it prevents the soil from drying out between rain events. Nature engineered this system over millions of years, and the Amish copied it using materials that American households discard by the ton every week. The process begins with no digging, no ripping, no back-breaking labor. Whatever is currently growing in the bed, whether it is crabgrass, thistle, bindweed, or even an old lawn, gets cut or mowed as low to the ground as possible. Just cut it down, do not pull it. The root systems left in the ground will die on their own. The area then gets watered thoroughly, not as a symbolic gesture, but because wet soil activates the microbial community underneath and signals to earthworms that the surface is about to become interesting. Then comes the cardboard. Plain brown corrugated cardboard, with all tape, stickers, and glossy printed sections removed, gets laid down in overlapping sheets across the entire bed. The overlap is not optional, and it is not a minor detail. Every edge must overlap the adjacent sheet by at minimum 4 to 6 inches. Weeds are opportunistic beyond what most gardeners appreciate. A gap of a single inch between 2 cardboard sheets is wide enough for a determined weed seedling to find, exploit, and push through within a week. The reason cardboard outperforms plastic landscape fabric, which is sold at every hardware store in America and purchased by millions of gardeners every season, comes down to 2 biological realities that plastic cannot replicate. First, cardboard is completely opaque to light. It blocks 100% of the sunlight reaching the soil surface beneath it, instantly shutting down photosynthesis for any living plant material below, and preventing every one of those 15,000 buried weed seeds from receiving the light trigger they need to germinate. Second, and this is the part that excites soil researchers, cardboard is made of cellulose, which is one of the primary food sources for earthworms. As the damp cardboard sits on the soil surface, it draws earthworms up from deeper layers the way a dinner bell draws a crowd. Those worms begin tunneling through compacted soil immediately, aerating it for free, and depositing castings directly in the zone where plant roots will be growing. Over the course of 4 to 6 months, the cardboard biodegrades completely. It disappears into the earth right at the moment when it is no longer needed, having accomplished its work and fed the soil biology in the process. Plastic landscape fabric, by contrast, persists for decades. It slowly suffocates the biology beneath it, degrades into microplastic fragments that contaminate the soil profile, and eventually has to be pulled out by hand in ragged, root-tangled strips that make the original weed problem look manageable. On top of the cardboard goes a layered organic system. Traditional Amish practice calls for 2 to 4 inches of nitrogen-rich compost laid directly on the cardboard surface, followed by a protective top layer of carbon-rich mulch, straw, shredded autumn leaves, or wood chips. Soil scientist Dr. Christine Jones has documented how this kind of diverse, multi-layered organic covering acts as a buffer system for the soil biology beneath it, maintaining consistent moisture and temperature through both drought and heavy rainfall, creating a biological resilience that bare soil or chemically treated soil simply cannot replicate. The detail that consistently surprises people when they first learn this method is that planting does not have to wait months for the cardboard to break down. Transplants can go into the bed the same day the cardboard goes down. A small X gets cut into the cardboard with a utility knife. The flaps get peeled back, the transplant gets set into the native soil below, and the cardboard gets folded snugly back around the base of the stem. The result is a plant that has immediate access to undisturbed soil biology, with the surrounding surface protected from both weeds and moisture loss. Gardeners who have used this system describe a visible difference in early growth compared to plants set in conventionally prepared beds just a few feet away. Deeper green color in the leaves, faster establishment, and dramatically fewer weeds competing for resources from day one. The cardboard layer handles the weed problem from above, but there is a second, invisible battle happening inside every planting hole, one that costs most gardeners years of mediocre results, and the Amish solution to it costs absolutely nothing. There is a specific kind of gardening frustration that is particularly maddening because it makes no logical sense. Everything looks right. The plants are watered consistently, the beds have been amended with compost, the sunlight is adequate, and still the plants just sit there, month after month, growing slowly, producing little, their leaves a slightly pale and unimpressive green instead of the deep, vigorous color that signals real health. The problem in most of these cases is not a lack of nutrients in the soil. The nutrients are physically present. The problem is pH, and a pH that is even slightly out of balance acts like a padlock on a pantry full of food. The groceries are right there. The plants simply cannot open the door to reach them. Most vegetables perform best in a soil pH range between 6.0 and 7.0. Below that range, essential nutrients including calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium become chemically bound to soil particles and unavailable for root uptake, regardless of how much fertilizer has been added. Above that range, micronutrients including iron and manganese lock up in the same way. Many American garden soils drift out of this window over time through a combination of acid rain, heavy watering with chlorinated municipal water, and the accumulation of organic matter that breaks down acidically. The Amish solution to this problem involves 2 ingredients that most American households already have and routinely discard: spent coffee grounds and hardwood ash from a fireplace or wood stove. Used correctly, these two materials together can balance soil pH, unlock locked nutrients, stimulate microbial activity, and provide a direct hit of immediately available minerals to newly planted transplants, all in the time it takes to prepare a single planting hole. But used incorrectly, and this is where most people who have heard of this technique go wrong, they can scorch young roots and make the pH problem worse than it was before. Spent coffee grounds are genuinely useful as a soil amendment. They provide nitrogen, they attract earthworms, and they stimulate bacterial activity in the soil. However, with repeated heavy applications over time, coffee grounds gradually push soil pH downward in the acidic direction. That slow drift begins locking up calcium and phosphorus at exactly the moment the plants need them most. The counterbalance is wood ash, specifically ash from clean, untreated hardwood. Never ash from charcoal briquettes, painted lumber, or pressure-treated wood, all of which contain chemical residues that have no business near food plants. Pure hardwood ash is a concentrated source of potassium, calcium, and magnesium, which are the exact minerals that tomatoes, peppers, squash, and most heavy-fruiting vegetables need to build strong cell walls and produce dense, flavorful yields. The mistake that trips up nearly everyone who tries to combine these two ingredients is applying the wood ash dry. Dry ash is highly alkaline, and when it contacts the nitrogen in coffee grounds directly, the alkalinity triggers a chemical reaction that converts soluble nitrogen into ammonia gas. That ammonia escapes into the air before the plant can absorb any of it, wasting the primary benefit of the coffee grounds entirely. On top of that, a localized pocket of highly alkaline dry ash around tender young roots can chemically burn them before the plant has any chance to establish. The traditional workaround that has been passed down through generations of Amish gardening practice is to convert the ash into a liquid extract before use. 2 tablespoons of clean hardwood ash stirred into 1 liter of water and left to sit overnight produces a cloudy, milky liquid that carries the full mineral content of the ash in a form that is potent but safely diluted. At planting time, a generous handful of spent coffee grounds goes loosely into the bottom of the planting hole. Then, 1/4 cup of the ash extract gets poured gently over the grounds. The dissolved alkaline minerals neutralize the acidity of the coffee gradually and evenly, without any destructive pH spike, and the chemistry settles into exactly the balance window where nutrients unlock. Dr. Jerry Hatfield, former director of the USDA National Laboratory for Agriculture and the Environment, spent decades researching how soil chemistry directly influences a plant's own immune function. His findings confirmed what Amish growers understood intuitively. A plant growing in properly balanced soil chemistry activates internal disease resistance mechanisms that no external chemical spray can replicate from the outside. The transplant that goes into a properly prepared hole enters a biologically active, pH-balanced pocket of soil and begins growing with a momentum that plants set in unprepared holes simply do not match. Within 3 weeks, the difference is visible to the naked eye. At the end of every growing season, after the last tomatoes have come in and the bean vines have been cleared away, most American gardeners do the same thing. They leave the beds bare. The soil sits exposed through the fall and winter, open to erosion, open to compaction from rain, and open to colonization by every weed species that has been waiting patiently for an uncontested stretch of ground. In nature, bare soil is an emergency state, a temporary condition that the ecosystem moves immediately to correct by germinating whatever grows fastest in that location. In most American gardens, what grows fastest is not what the gardener planted. Experienced Amish growers never leave soil bare. At the end of the harvest season, they scatter seed for a specific cover crop that does something that sounds almost too convenient to be real. It manufactures its own natural herbicide while growing, suppresses weeds automatically through the winter and into spring, and then feeds the soil as it decomposes. That plant is cereal rye. Not ryegrass, not annual ryegrass, but true cereal rye, the same grain that has been grown across the northern United States and Europe for centuries. Researchers at Cornell University and Penn State University have spent years documenting a biological process called allelopathy, which is the ability of certain plants to release chemical compounds that inhibit the germination and growth of competing plants nearby. Cereal rye is one of the most powerful allelopathic crops that exists in temperate climates. As it grows through cold fall and winter temperatures, even through hard frosts that kill most other plants, it produces compounds called benzoxazenones in its roots and leaves. When the rye residue begins to break down in early spring, those compounds release directly into the surrounding soil. University studies have documented suppression rates for notorious garden invaders, including pigweed, crabgrass, and lamb's quarters, of up to 95% for periods of 30 to 60 days following rye termination. 95% suppression of weed germination for up to 2 months, achieved entirely through the plant's own chemistry, with no spraying, no pulling, and no cost beyond a few dollars for seed. The fall planting process is genuinely simple. Cereal rye seed, available in bulk at farm supply stores and online seed retailers for just a few dollars per pound, gets broadcast lightly across the bed 4 to 6 weeks before the first hard frost is expected. It sprouts within days and grows steadily through the cold months with no irrigation, no fertilization, and no attention from the gardener. In early spring, roughly 3 to 4 weeks before planting time, the rye gets cut at the base and left lying flat on the soil surface. No tilling, no removal. The cut rye forms a thick, dense mat directly on the soil, and that mat now performs 3 simultaneous functions. It blocks sunlight from reaching the weed seeds below. It reduces soil moisture evaporation by up to 30%. And it continues releasing its allelopathic chemistry into the soil as it decomposes. Spring transplants push through small openings cut in the mat and go directly into the undisturbed soil beneath. The fungal networks below the surface, untouched by any tilling, are fully intact and immediately available to the new plant's root system. The combination of the allelopathic chemistry above and the living biology below gives transplants a competitive advantage over weeds that no chemical program currently sold in American garden centers can match on either cost or duration. Even with cardboard mulch and rye cover crops managing the large-scale weed pressure, there remains one specific gardening challenge where the weed problem feels particularly unfair: growing crops from seed. Carrots, beets, lettuce, radishes, and beans start as tiny, fragile seedlings that spend their first 2 weeks of life at a serious competitive disadvantage against any weed that sprouts alongside them. A weed seedling does not care about your carrot. It grows faster, roots deeper, and shades out the competition without hesitation. The Amish answer to this specific problem is a technique called the stale seedbed, and it works by turning the weed's own biological instincts into a trap. The bed gets prepared exactly as if planting day had arrived. The surface is raked smooth, watered deeply, and left looking perfectly ready. Then, nothing happens. No seeds go in. The gardener walks away for 7 to 10 days. What follows is entirely predictable. Thousands of weed seeds resting near the surface sense the moisture and the light and germinate eagerly, pushing tiny thread-thin shoots above the soil surface, confident they have won uncontested ground. That is the moment the trap closes. A sharp hoe skims across the top half-inch of soil, barely disturbing the surface, wiping out an entire generation of weed seedlings before any of them has developed a root system capable of resisting the cut or a stem strong enough to recover. The work takes 5 minutes. Repeating this cycle twice before actual planting can reduce weed emergence in that bed by 50 to 70% for the entire growing season, because an entire generation of seeds that would have competed with the crop has already been germinated and destroyed. The critical technical point is depth. Scraping too deep brings fresh seeds up from lower layers and restarts the cycle. Shallow is the key, just enough to sever the seedling at the soil line. For the open spaces between established, taller crops like corn, tomatoes, and pole beans, the Amish use white Dutch clover as a living ground cover sown directly between rows once the main crop plants are established enough not to be crowded. This low-growing clover delivers a combination of benefits that no inert mulch can replicate. It forms a dense, continuous carpet that physically excludes weeds from bare soil between rows. It fixes atmospheric nitrogen through a symbiotic relationship with rhizobium bacteria in its root nodules, delivering that nitrogen directly into the surrounding soil and feeding neighboring crops without a single bag of fertilizer being opened. Its clusters of white blossoms attract pollinating insects throughout the growing season, measurably increasing fruit set on tomatoes, squash, cucumbers, and peppers growing in the same beds. And then there is the element of this system that almost nobody talks about, because it happens after dark. Research published by Cornell University documented that common ground beetles, small, hard-shelled nocturnal predators that colonize gardens with stable mulch layers and undisturbed soil cover, emerge at night and consume weed seeds resting on the soil surface at rates that researchers found genuinely surprising. In some documented cases, ground beetle populations in covered, no-till garden beds consumed up to 65% of surface weed seeds before those seeds ever had the chance to germinate. While the gardener sleeps, a quiet, invisible army is patrolling the rows and eliminating next season's weed problem, one seed at a time. The system the Amish built over generations is not a collection of individual tricks. It is an interlocking network of biological processes, each one reinforcing the others, each one replacing a purchase with an observation, each one converting an enemy into an ally. The tiller that destroyed fungal networks gets retired. The cardboard that would go to a landfill covers bare soil and feeds earthworms. The coffee grounds from this morning's pot go into the planting hole. The ash from last winter's fireplace unlocks the nutrients the soil was already holding. The rye that grows through November and December kills weeds in April. The clover between the rows feeds both the soil and the bees. The beetles that live in the mulch eat the seeds that would become next year's weeds. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is purchased that nature was already offering for free. The gardeners who built this system did not have access to university research papers. They did not attend agricultural conferences or read soil science journals. They simply paid attention to what the land was telling them over decades, and they passed what they learned down through families and communities with the same seriousness that other traditions pass down scripture. Modern science has now spent years confirming what they observed, that healthy soil is a living system, that living systems maintain themselves when protected and fed, and that fighting that system with chemicals and machinery is always more expensive, more exhausting, and less effective than learning to work within it. Every technique in this method shares one characteristic: it gets better with time. The cardboard beds that needed attention in year 1 barely need any in year 3. The fungal networks that took 2 seasons to rebuild begin performing functions in year 4 that no bag of fertilizer could replicate. The beetle population that ate 60% of surface weed seeds in the first season eats more the next year because the habitat has improved. The system compounds. The garden that felt like a battle gradually becomes something closer to a collaboration. A place where the gardener's job shifts from fighting weeds and buying chemicals to simply observing, adjusting, and harvesting. If you have been losing the same weed war for years, if you have been spending money every spring on products that deliver 6 weeks of relief and then require repurchasing, the Amish no-till method asks only one thing of you. Try it on one bed this season. Just one. Lay the cardboard, add the compost, plant the rye in the fall, and watch what the soil does when you stop fighting it. The results will not wait long to show themselves. Leave a comment below and tell us what your biggest weed problem has been this year, because the answer to it is almost certainly somewhere in what you just watched. If this changed the way you think about your garden, hit the like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. The best gardens are built one season at a time, And the next season always starts right now.